Shalom from Jerusalem. I'm Jonathan Essen, and this is TV7's Daily Update. And in today's edition, we will try and focus on the latest. Earlier today, of course, President Donald Trump has signed the Board of Peace into creation, namely an international organization that some fear, primarily the Europeans, may replace the United Nations. What is the ins and outs of this organization? We'll discuss more at length shortly. We will also touch on the situation in Syria, naturally, the 4-day ceasefire that was called for by Damascus is now in its second day, and we are waiting to see how the sides are going to mitigate their differences. It's pretty much an arrangement for the surrender of the Kurds and for the disbandment of the organizations in the northeastern region of Hasaka. Much chatter is currently circulating throughout Syria with threatening messages that the southern territories of Syria may be next, particularly the predominantly Druze, with some 50 to 60,000 also Christians living there in the governorate of Sweda, a point that, of course, is a red line for Israel. And last but not certainly not least is the situation in Iran. What can we learn from the latest developments vis-a-vis this matter at a time when we see a lot of troops amassing, military assets, a strike group set to enter into the theater? But before all of that, let's introduce our experts for today, to include Brigadier General in Reserve Yossi Kuperwasser, who formerly served as the Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs Director General, a head of the IDF Intelligence Directorate's Research and Assessment Division, as well as currently the president of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. It's great to have you with us, General.
My pleasure. Great to be with you.
Absolutely. It's good to have Yossi. Also joining us is retired Brigadier General Mark Kimmett, formerly an Assistant Secretary of State for Political and Military Affairs of the United States, as well as a senior officer at the U.S. Central Command. It's great to have you with us also, General.
Thank you, Jonathan.
And let's start with you, General Kimmett, the Board of Peace. We hear that President Trump has done a great job in forming a new organization that is about to establish a paradigm shift for the terror-infested Gaza Strip. Are we optimistic at this point?
We're optimistic that there is something. And as we've said before, something beats nothing. Without the Board of Peace, there didn't seem to be any movement either through the international organizations like the United Nations or the Arab League, any bilateral relationships, no coalition of the willing. So the very fact that there is an organization that is coming together to address the security, the humanitarian, the reconstruction needs for Gaza is a net positive.
Thank you, General Kimmett. General Kuperwasser, your take on this new board that is, on the one side, accepted by Israel. We do hear that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is among the world leaders who will join this board. But nonetheless, we also are at a stage where the remains of hostage, Ran Gvili, are still in Hamas captivity, something that, of course, is a breach of the 20-point plan of President Trump. How do we converge the current gains, so to speak, when it comes to the Gaza Strip, to the fact that not all of Israel's war aims have been accomplished?
Well, I think that even though the Board of Peace is a part of the Trump plan for peace in Gaza, this was the original idea. Eventually, what happened is that the Board of Peace is up to much greater tasks, and not only Gaza. And when it comes to Gaza, I think that President Trump made it clear that he wants to see Ran Gvili released, the body of Ran Gvili released, and he's totally committed to that, even though we move to the second stage. And that not only that, he also clarified that he believes that Hamas has to be disarmed. That's our condition for moving forward towards stage 2. He anyhow cannot move beyond where we are today, because the ISF, the International Stabilization Force, has not been established, and there's no power in the Gaza Strip that can replace Israel and or the Hamas. So it's the board of peace, even though it is a part of the plan, now it is a part of something much different. It's a part of something that is trying to change the world order. And it's not only the board of peace, which is a coalition of the friends of Trump, I would say more than the willing. There's a coalition of the friends of Trump, people who are ready to join hands with Trump in changing the world order. And the main goal of this new situation is to enable Trump to move forward in doing all kinds of things that until recently were considered to be unthinkable, like regime change in Iran. That's, I think, the most important thing that Trump is up to in our respect, and of course Greenland in other contexts. That's following what happened in Venezuela. So it's we are talking about a totally different situation, and everybody understands that what Trump has in mind is to see that this board of peace would replace the UN eventually, and that's why so many people are against it, because they are afraid that the current world order that served them is going to change. Some of them are afraid of any change because they are a little bit in an awkward position, that they're afraid that the new order is not going to allow them to enjoy the capabilities they had in the past. And some of them are those who are worried that the change in the world order is going to be directed directly against them, like Iran and others, who are not considered even to be part of this board of peace.
Indeed. Well, General Kimmett, I'd like to hear you expand on this a little, also at a time when, on the one hand, as General Cooper-Vassell just mentioned, the International Stabilization Force has yet to be formed. We do not see countries lining up to join a military force that will be in charge of dealing with once again, terror-infested territory, when also at the same time we do hear the Islamist Hamas unwilling to disarm unless it gains some type of political role for certain elements within its organization. How can President Trump reconcile with such a reality at a time when we do see the grandiose plans coming out of this Board of Peace conference in Davos? And quite frankly, it seems like much of that, at least at this point in time, is or should be considered as wishful thinking.
Well, again, I would say two things. Number one, we certainly understand the objections that Israel has about the security force, especially if countries are engaged in it. So I understand why Israel would have some of a dark view of that. But just because it has not yet been set up does not mean it won't be set up. So let's see what happens in the not too distant future. Now, with regards to the overall, as General Cooper-Vassell would say, the coalition of the diplomatic coalition of the willing. Well, look, the answer is if any country should be ecstatic about replacing the United Nations, it should be Israel. The current United Nations is infected with anti-Semitism. It is certainly not a board of peace. It is an organization that is feckless at best, counterproductive at best, destructive at worst. I don't necessarily think that President Trump is trying to replace the UN, but if he wants to throw down a cudgel and say, fix it, or I've got a better idea, good for him. But if the state of Israel wants to perpetuate an organization that is rampantly anti-Israel and anti-Semitic, so be it. The United States just feels otherwise.
Oh, I don't think there is any daylight when it comes to the perspective vis-a-vis the United Nations, considering its track record. I'm not sure about the replace word, but rather dismantle would be more of a proper term for the United Nations in Trump's view, at least in the terminology that he has been utilizing in recent weeks and months. Go ahead, General Kimmett.
No, I think you can use NATO as a good analog. He has been ruthless in his criticism of NATO. As the old baseball analogy goes, play me or trade me. You want America in NATO, make it work. If you don't want America in NATO, or you're not willing to do what NATO's supposed to do, we'll come up with a military option, a coalition of the willing. We did that in Iraq 1, Iraq 2. We've done it throughout. Again, I think we've got to heed the creed of Trump observers, which is you can either take him literally or you can take him seriously. If you take him literally, he's going to pull people out of the UN and shut the place down. If you take him seriously, you'll realize that this is just an attempt to do reform, which nobody else has been able to do. It's the same way with NATO. If he was really serious about America splitting with NATO, the first thing he would do would take all those generals that are operating in the 15 different NATO military commands and just bring them home and make it look like what he wants to have is the destruction of NATO. So, look, the people that are most worried about what's happening here primarily are old Europe, in particular in this case, France and the United Kingdom. Why France and the United Kingdom in this day and age should be one of the two of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council is beyond me. Where is Brazil? Why can't India replace France? They are no longer world powers. The United Nations has got to do some serious reform if it wants to be taken as a serious organization.
Well, I'm sure President Macron will disagree with you about being a world power, but that's his way
Well,
of getting around
that's his own delusional fantasy.
Sure.
That's what happens when you look through rose-colored sunglasses as he was wearing at Davos.
Yeah, that was baffling for many.
I think,
General Cooper-Vassell.
yeah, I think that it's not about the destruction or the dismantling of these organizations. It's about making them realize that they are not relevant anymore. That's the making irrelevantization of these organizations by stopping the financing of some 50 organizations of the UN. He send this message, and I think that this is the case. He needs another tool, another organization to work with that is going to be relevant to what he envisages, what needs to be done. And this is why he feels that the old organizations are unfit for this purpose. He repeatedly says that the UN was supposed to promote peace, but he got no help from them on any of the 8 peace deals that he made. And he's right. The UN, as Mark said, is an anti-Semitic organization promoting all kinds of ideas that are dangerous for the security of the United States and Israel. So what is the purpose of supporting it? We need something to replace it.
Well, as General Kimmett indeed said, counterproductive at best, destructive at worst. General Cooper-Vassell, I'd like to shift gears to Syria. Let's focus on the latest, since it seems like the Kurds are pretty much with the back against a wall at this point in time. We do hear Tom Barrack, the U.S. ambassador to Turkey and envoy to Syria, stating that he had earlier today a meeting with Mazloum Abdi, the general of the SDF, and all the while he voices some optimism. I do hear that there are still forces within this splintered alliance that are considering fighting irrespective of what the SDF ultimately wants.
Well, definitely the situation of the Kurds is very problematic at this stage. They lost some of their governorates that they were controlling, especially those who are not populated with Kurds, but with Sunni Arabs. But now the pressure is on the Kurd heart of northern Syria, the Rojava area. And they don't seem to have any international support. They were building for a long time an American and some remote Israeli support. The feeling in Israel is supportive of the Kurds, but I don't think that much is going to be done about it. And the support of the United States is fading away. And ever since Shara came to power, The Americans, following the lines put forward by the Turks with their special relations with Erdogan and with the involvement of Tom Barak, are supporting the ideas of one united Syria in which all the minorities are integrated into the central government. And this is something that the Turks cannot afford. Sorry, the Kurds cannot afford. And that's where we stand right now, because without the Americans, without the American pressure over Shara and the Turks, they are helpless. That's the situation. They were trying to create the impression for a long time that they have enough troops under their command, under Mazloum Abdi command, that can face any kind of threat as long as Turkey doesn't fight directly against them. Turns out that this impression was not substantiated by the facts on the ground. And this is a very difficult situation for the Kurds, and they must reassess the situation.
General Kemet, the international support waning for the SDF has been a long time in the making. It seems like there were no true guarantees from any of the states, even though some reports indicate that there were allegations towards certain parties that Israel may have guaranteed certain protections and such, which never happened. But nonetheless, if we speak also specifically about American support, since they did utilize, and it was a two-way street, naturally, but they did utilize the SDF forces as the ground force to combat the Islamic State as part of Operation Inherent Resolve. And it seems like now, according to Envoy Barak at least, they're no longer needed, despite the fact that CENTCOM did announce that it intends to move all of the Islamic State fighters from Syria into Iraq for lack of trust, presumably, of Damascus's capacity to actually guard those terrorists in its own territory.
Yeah, I'm conflicted on this. Which argument would you like me to be? Supportive of the Kurds or not supportive of the Kurds? Throw it out and I'll argue it.
Well, go both ways.
Let's start with support for the Kurds. They've lost 32,000 fighters. We were massively searching for a local solution when the Turks backed out of the agreement. There was no way that ISIS could have been defeated if we defeated them with the Iraqis in Iraq alone. You want to defeat the organization, we had to take it. At World War II, we had to go to Berlin, and with Syria, we had to go to Raqqa. That never would have happened unless we found a local partner. Up stepped this Kurdish local protection force called the Syrian, the YPG at that time, because they were predominantly Kurd, and then to kind of get everybody on the right side of the politics, started calling it the Syrian Defense Force. So the short answer is they have provided a tough service. They've shed a lot of blood. They've achieved strategic victory for the world in the defeat of ISIS, and they have held their faces to the sand since Raqqa fell. So we have an obligation as a country to support our allies and make sure that they achieve the political goals, which was their intention to fight alongside of us in the first place.
Now the counter argument.
Since the beginning of the policy, on day one, when we lashed up with the SDF, at that time the YPG, almost 15 years ago, we made it very clear to protect them from Turkey that the support the United States would provide had three components: temporary, transactional, and tactical. That all the heavy weapons that we would provide, all the equipment that we would provide, would be handed over when the battle was over. We made no assertions about sovereignty. We made no assertions about land. We made no assertions about a post-ISIS determination of what their forces would be. Unfortunately, we had a bunch of military officers that worked alongside them. we all know as former officers, as former soldiers, how you feel connected to your battle buddy. Uh, uh, and if a guy wants to fight and die next to you, you're going to want to fight and die next to him. But nonetheless, the American policy was clear from the beginning. The only way the SDF would have been permitted to work with the United States under the strong, strong objections of Turkey if this was an affair, not a marriage. And the affair is over.
General Kupelwasser earlier today at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Israeli President Yitzhak Herzog has reiterated Israel's pledge to protect the Druze in southern Syria. Do you see this as a perpetuated commitment, or are there ongoing challenges that may put Israel in a uncomfortable situation vis-a-vis its commitments?
Well, obviously, there are going to be all kinds of challenges in front of us because, in as far as the Syrian regime is concerned, they may look at what's happening now with the Kurds as a development that would lead them to ask the same thing from the Druze in the south. And we have to be very careful about that. And the fact that President Herzog said what he said is very important as a message to the Syrian regime to make sure that they realize that this is not the same case. Because unlike the Kurds, the Druze are on our doorstep, more or less. And the kind of commitment we have to the Druze is quite different than the one we have to the Kurds, because the Druze community inside Israel fight together with the Israelis, with all other Israelis in the IDF, and it's a real alliance, and it's a real commitment to the safety and security, including in the Druze mountain, in this area of Sweden. And because of that, I think that this message was in time. It's not going to be easy because the Americans have their own opinion about it, and definitely Shara has his own opinion about it. And it might be problematic to make sure that the Druze are safe after what happened to the Kurds in northern Syria.
So the Damascus regime has actually sent two Druze sheikhs named Suleiman Abdelbaki and Leith Balous to Washington to try and soar them up, or to try and present them as Druze leaders. They're not Druze leaders. They have no following whatsoever. And ultimately, it seems like this attempt is just a signal that they are trying to push their assertions over Sweda. Again, as General Kupelwasser mentioned, Damascus is not necessarily aware of how resolved Israel is when it comes to Sweda governorate in southern Syria. But we have only 3 minutes left, and I'd still like to touch briefly on the Iran topic. A couple of 100 hours already. Internet blackout. We don't hear much of what is happening inside Iran beyond the temporary footage coming out here and there. But General Kimmett, in a minute, what should we take into account when speaking about Iran?
I think we need to continue to track the movement of the carrier task force. I think one of the reasons that President Trump pulled back temporarily, he holstered his gun, is I think there was a recognition that if this turned into a much larger war than the situation in Venezuela turned out to be, there was a chance for the Iranians to demonstrate their missile and rocket capability about 1,000x of what they did during the 12-day war. Fundamentally, there's probably not sufficient air and missile defense in the region without that carrier task force and the assets that it brings along with it to protect our forces and our allies' forces from that missile threat. So I think that suspension of the protests gave the president time to get a better military posture if the protests start again or if he wants to take unilateral action.
We're talking, of course, about force protection, particularly in U.S. bases near the border with Iran, since during the 12-day war, Israel naturally focused on the medium to long-range ballistic missiles rather than the short-range missiles that do not reach Israel. And therefore, that was also part of the calculation, from what I hear at least. General Kupelvassel, in 1 minute, no more. I'd like to hear your take on that as well.
I think the most important thing is that there's been a major change in the attitude towards Iran, whereas until now our focus was on the nuclear project and the ballistic missile project. Now the issue at stake is Iran regime's stability and survival. And the potential of the issue of regime change has become a legitimate matter for discussion and for performance. And this is a major change that is going to affect the situation concerning Iran for the long time, for the long future.
Absolutely. Well, you went even lower than 1 minute, I must say, so I'm quite impressed. I will mention
Not
that
very
when it
typical
comes
for me.
to not typical for you, General. I apologize. With that, I'd like to nonetheless thank you, General Kimmett and General Kupelvassel, for all of your valuable insights today. And I'd like to thank all of our viewers at home as well. Until our next edition. From here in Jerusalem, Shalom.
My name is Doron Gavish, and my background, 30 years of serving in the Israeli Air Force. My last job, I was the commander of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense during the introduction of the Iron Dome to the defense of Israel. All of this allows me really to be part of the team here in TV7. It is super important to have such a platform. We talk about the global situation, we talk about Israel and those different angles which are relevant to the discussion.
For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.